3rd, is it?
Already May.
Already? Man, before you know it's Christmas.
2 days of Cinco de Mayo.
So if you have a phone, if you could put it in the silent mode, we appreciate it. And if you'd like to make a comment, you can come fill out the slip in the back and give it to the young lady to my left, my far left, my far left. Okay, with that, let's do our pledge. Okay, Richard, you're up.
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can we get a roll call, please?
Chair Algauer,
Here.
Vice Chair Hicks, Commissioner Beck,
Here.
Commissioner Chester,
Here.
Commissioner Higginson,
Here.
Commissioner Snodgrass,
Here.
and Commissioner Vick.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, and we have any public comments, Ben?
No public comment on items that are not on the agenda.
Okay, then we'll move to the consent agenda, which would be the meeting of April 19th in minutes. So I get a motion,
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
got a motion and a second. Any changes? With that, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Okay, with that, I guess we'll just move right on into the one and only project. Where am I at? Okay. So with case number 22-011, a CUP architectural review and a density bonus. Okay, so at that point, does anyone? I don't think we're gonna read it.
We can just ask if there is
Right.
any ex parte communication and also
Okay.
open the public hearing.
So if anybody has, we'll get a roll call on that. As part of anybody have anything, get a roll call on that.
Chair Algauer,
None?
Commissioner Beck,
None.
Commissioner Chester,
None.
Commissioner Higginson,
I did talk to Madeline with just a couple of clarifications on the, just on the item, but she clarified those for me.
Commissioner Snodgrass,
None.
and Commissioner Vick.
None.
Thank you.
Okay, what that means, everybody is clear on the disclosure. So we need a staff presentation.
Maddie will do the public hearing presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman Algauer and Planning Commissioners. This is case number 22-011, which includes a density bonus agreement, a conditional use permit, and architectural review. The density bonus agreement would allow a 32% increase in unit density on the residential parcel. Conditional use permit and architectural review would permit a 16-unit multifamily phased housing project. 3 of the units are going to be allocated as the low-income affordable level throughout the proposed 1.43 acre development. So again, the project site is 1.43 acres and is currently vacant. The zoning is RM72C and is surrounded by other RM72C properties, while existing development is mostly single-family residences to the north, south, and east of the site. The RM72C land use zoning could allow for future development of other multifamily projects. A mobile home park is located to the west of the site. Additionally, I wanted to point out that there's an existing access easement for a northern neighbor that shares the northern property line with the subject site. And as a part of the application, the applicant proposes to improve Poplar Street, which is identified on the exhibit before you, which is a existing dedicated as a public road, and then the remaining street improvements would be through a private street. So in regards to the density bonus component of this project, I want to go over a brief overview on density bonus law. I know Ben has given some preliminary discussion in some previous housing law kind of sessions. So density bonus law was enacted in 1979 with the goal to encourage affordable housing development and is based on a sliding scale with the greater percentage affordability that an applicant chooses to deed restrict, the higher the density bonus allowed through on a project site. This percentage increase is an objective standard. So now we're going to go over kind of the density bonus calculation related to this specific project proposal. On a 1.43 acre site with RM72C zoning, the base density permitted through the general plan on this project is 12 units. However, as a part of the application, the applicant proposes 18% of the units reserved at the low income affordable level. This is 2.16 units, which, consistent with state law, rounds to 3 units. So with 18% of the units at the low income level, or 3 units, we're going to refer to the scale that was on the previous slide to determine what the density bonus for this project could be. So on the screen, I have circled with an affordable unit percentage at 18% and agreeing to covenant those 3 units at the low income density level, the applicant could achieve a 32% density bonus. So 12 units base density times a 32% density bonus is 15.84 units, which again rounds to 16. So further, the site plan on the screen associated with the conditional use permit component of this application shows a total of 16 units configured into 8 duplex structures. There are decorative monument pilasters proposed as an entry statement at the front of the site, and 4 units are proposed to be constructed as a part of a phase 1, and these would flank the public street of Poplar, and the remaining 12 units would be constructed through phase 2. And again, these would front the future private road identified as Ramsey Court on the site plan. 45% of the project is proposed as landscape area with 2 detention basins proposed located along the northern edge of the site. 41 parking spaces are provided, and this surpasses the state law minimum requirement for density bonus projects, which is 1.5 on-site spaces per unit. So the applicant is only required to provide 24 spaces according to state law. And to clarify, this is on-site parking spaces, so they do not have to be enclosed. However, the applicant proposes 32 of these spaces as enclosed traditional garage spaces for an additional amenity for each unit. And again, this is not required as a part of state law. So for phasing of the project, there are 2 phases proposed. 4 units, units 13 to 16, located with frontage off of Poplar Street, would be constructed as a part of phase 1 with necessary fire and engineering improvements such as the road construction and drainage BMPs proposed in this phase, and then the remaining 12 units, units 1 to 12, and other necessary improvements would be constructed as a part of phase 2. So a part of the density bonus request, there are also some concessions and a waiver proposed by the applicant. Concessions and waivers are procedural elements that are to be allowed with the density bonus agreement process, again, consistent with state law, and further support our general plan policy HN 3.3 housing incentives, which is to facilitate development of market rate and affordable housing through regulatory incentives, example, density bonuses, permit processing, and other means where feasible and appropriate. A concession or incentive, often used interchangeably, are a modification of existing development standards, and they're tied to economic and feasibility of developing a proposed affordable project. They are limited in number and based on the percentage affordability, again on that sliding scale. And at the proposed 3-unit affordable component of this project, or 18%, the applicant qualifies for 2 incentives. A waiver is also a modification of existing development standards, but rather tied to physical and feasibility of developing a proposed affordable project at the maximum density. These can be unlimited in number, and the applicant is requesting 1. So now we're going to go over these concessions in the waiver. Again, there are 2 concessions, one to remove the requirement for sidewalks to be constructed within the multifamily project, and then the second is to reduce the minimum side yard setback for 2-story multifamily structures. The waiver requested is to reduce the minimum front yard setback requirement for 2-story multifamily structures, and given the scale of this project is rather negligible, as in practice and functionally, the front yard setback of this project is actually to be used as a side yard for one of the units that fronts Poplar Street. I'll highlight it with my laser pointer here. So recent court law highlights that density bonus law provides a developer with broad discretion to design projects with additional amenities, given if doing so would conflict with local development standards. An architecture review is also proposed as a component of this project. There are 3 different floor plans with 3 different elevations proposed within the development, and they provide a modern and craftsman blended aesthetic style. Option A floor plan and elevation is a 1,455 square foot structure. Option B floor plan is 1,548 square feet, and option C is 1,533 square feet. Some key features includes staggered gabled roofs, stucco, covered entryways, decorative shutters, and wood band accents along the roof line of the front elevation. And then each of the 8 individual duplex structures propose a unique color scheme, and this is within a soft color palette to provide additional variability within the development, but also in an effort to blend cohesively within the site and also nearby adjacent development within existing neighborhood. The conceptual landscaping is also submitted as a part of the architecture review and highlights magnolia trees to be planted within the front yard areas of the units. These are ornamental trees that will improve the aesthetic of the development and also provide shade to residents. As a standard condition of approval, the landscaping will be reviewed by our landscape architect through the building permit process. Some site photos are on the screen, and on the left-hand side, you can see the existing improvements of Poplar Street, and on the right-hand side is the existing gravel road, which leads to the adjacent neighbor's property to the north of the site. And this road would be improved and paved, and then the applicant has also agreed to provide a 19.5-foot driveway entrance to this property owner's site. So consistent with the conditional use permit application process, project notices were sent to neighbors within a 300-foot radius. Several calls were received requesting location confirmation, given that there is no exact address tied to this site and it's just an APN. So I provided a few email responses with clarification on the location, including site plans and screenshots of the land use and zoning district overlay. And then the adjacent neighbor to the north did come in and expressed some concerns related to traffic, parking, drainage patterns, perimeter screening, view sheds, and their property access. However, it should be noted that the general plan assumed a development of a multifamily project here through the environmental review. So it is anticipated to accommodate a multifamily site related to traffic. Parking surpasses that which is required through state law. Drainage patterns would be evaluated through the WQMP review process and the conditions of approval. Perimeter screening is proposed as vinyl fencing around the periphery of the site. View sheds are not protected by the general plan. However, the units are below 30 feet, which is the maximum height requirement in both the single family and the multifamily land use district. And the adjacent neighbor's property access will remain as the access easement is historic and will continue to serve their property. However, the road will just be improved and paved. There was also a request to protect pine trees. However, these are not protected trees and they are necessary to be removed in order to provide sufficient building pad area to achieve the maximum density. There were 2 letters received with conditions of approval proposed from the San Bernardino County Flood Control District. The second one was received through the public hearing notice. So condition of approval number 31 is proposed to be added to the conditions. And that's reflected on the screen and reads that the site may be affected, the storm drains around the site may be affected by the proposed project, and when planning for altering future storm drains, the project is subject to the City of Yucaipa Master Plan of Drainage, etc. And then in regards to environmental review, the project qualifies for infill exemption through Class 32. Development impact fees will be generated through the proposed project, and the estimate based on a total of 16 units with bedrooms using the current 2021 fee schedule is $273,978. It should be noted that the 2022 and 2023 schedules will be different as development impact fee schedules adjust annually with inflation and the California Construction Cost Index. So it's staff's recommendation that the project is approved, subject to the conditions of approval with the addition of proposed COA number 31. The findings are adopted as well as a categorical exemption, and that a notice of exemption is filed. The applicant is available and present here tonight for specific questions you may have for him.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Anybody have any questions for staff at this time? I have one question. In the conditional use permit, paragraph 21 it states that that phase one, one of the 4 units in phase 1 will be constructed as the low density, but that's all phases, right? Or is it just the one phase?
So 3 of the 16 units are proposed at the low income level and will need to have a density bonus agreement recorded that is to be approved by the city council through a separate document so that in perpetuity those units remain at the low income level. As a part of phase 1, because the applicant is proposing this in 2 phases, we will execute that density bonus document and they will commit to providing one of the 4 units at the low income level so that proportionally speaking, there's consistency and we ensure that there is an affordable unit collected in the first phase.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. Appreciate that. Is the applicant or a representative like to?
I have one question, JR.
Wait a second.
I have one question. Under the Government Code Section 65915D2B, it states that the 2 incentives must be provided if they're using at least 17% for the low income. With that said, if we don't agree with those incentives that they're requesting, would they have to come up with other options if we don't agree with those incentives or waivers?
So your grounds for denying a requested incentive or concession is pretty narrow. The government code presumes that their request is reasonable and it's the city's burden to show that it won't actually result in a cost reduction or that there would be a significant adverse impact on public health and safety, which is that difficult finding that we discussed before in the Housing Accountability Act. So it's very difficult because the city can't request that the applicant provide a pro forma or certain other documentation to prove the cost reduction. So it is very difficult from a legal perspective for a city, both at a staff level and at a commission level, to deny that requested incentive or concession.
I had one question, Jared.
Go ahead.
Just basically, I think address for engineering from the standpoint of when I was looking at the site, there's obviously a major kind of flooding course-way there, which is why I think the county has been actively concerned about this project. I don't know, historically, from an engineering, from the city standpoint, how has that been mitigated? Or I know we have a lot of retention and detention basins in this city, so is there any kind of historical data on this kind of floodway or this potential area there that would impact the neighbor that's obviously there now? And then how does it affect the development? It looks like they've addressed it with new retention basins, but when I was just looking at the aerial, there seems to be a significant, basin there.
Yeah, so the existing drainage channel there is managed by the flood control district. The floodplain would be a FEMA designation. I believe the structures that are shown on the plan are outside of the floodplain. If there are any changes or if there is concern that structures would be within the floodplain, then they would have to get an elevation certificate to show that their structure base level is above what is found on the floodplain. And then just as a standard condition for all projects, they're not able to change the amount of water that the existing channel, the capacity of that existing channel. So even though there is new riprap that they're proposing, they're not actually changing the capacity of the existing channel that's there north of their project.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else with staff? Okay, if you can make your presentation and state your name and address for our record, please.
Well, Chairman, good evening. Planning Commission, Planning and City staff. My name is Alex Rashid. I am the developer on this project and at the same time the engineer on the project as well. And I'm looking forward tonight for your approval and blessing on this project and developing a beautiful piece of property there. And I want to comment on the engineering department when she said that the project is outside the flood control. The entire site is within X. The north property is within the flood zone, which is an A. And the riprap, the one she was talking about, is the part of the kind of the drainage structure adjacent to the northwest corner of my property. And I want to, there is riprap right now, but it's kind of eroded and destroyed. I want to go and repair it and fix it so that way I do not have any further damage to my property from, the current drainage. And I'm available to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions for the applicant?
Who's going to be managing this property?
We are going to manage it in-house.
So will they be rentals or?
They're going to be rentals, yes.
They're all going to be rentals? And how many people are you going to allow in each of these rentals?
It's a 3-bedroom units, so we are hoping that we can get, whatever families, like 4 or 5 people.
Okay.
I saw there's obviously the existing property that have talked to the property owner and you've made some concessions with her about improving her driveway and some other things. And obviously there's some, it's just an older home, but from the standpoint of screening, you're building a beautiful neighborhood and you're doing a lot of improvements. Are you going anything beyond that for this neighbor or for that individual that has that property? I know you're re-improving her driveway, but I couldn't tell, I guess initially how far you're going with that improvement or doing some additional landscaping, because obviously it's her entry and her right-of-way into her property.
Well, right now, they are going through the property. They have just about 8 to 9 feet of asphalt paving as an access throughout my property. But there is a 30-foot easement for access, and there is sewer line also running through my property as well, and there is public utility easement on it. So I spoke to her son, and I proposed a 12-foot access, and he wants 19. And I was able to accommodate him with a 19-foot access, and he's going to put a roll-up gate.
Okay.
Just a rolling gate. And I have to improve the extension of Poplar, even though the extension is not going to be public, it's going to stay private. But I'm gonna improve that, as a normal street, 30-foot wide, curb to curb. That way she can access it, and at the same time, my 4 units can access it as well. Then I go into Ramsey's Court. And the first phase will have that access fully for finished product. That way can allow her to go in and out. I'm not improving anything on her property, but it looks like I was doing some studies last couple of days. She has a gas meter on my property, she has water meter on my property, and a power pole. So we're gonna underground the power pole and provide those utilities to her through our property. So I feel obligated to do it for her.
Well, and I
wanna be a
appreciate
good
you
neighbor.
working with her on that, so.
And also, her son requested that we, they don't need the parking in the front of it, which I don't want the additional parking. I have designated 8 parking stalls for this purpose, and 1 parking is gonna be for bicycles or motorcycles, and the rest of the curb will be painted in red for fire safety, for us and for them.
Thank you.
And if they park on their property, but my people won't go in there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one suggestion. I'm not an advocate for monuments. They seem to be targets for people who are driving in and out, maybe had a little bit too much to drink. So I would suggest not putting a monument on either of those corners. Where I live, the corner that the landowner had put a monument there because it was a thoroughbred rescue place for a little while. And he was replacing that thing every other month. Somebody was hitting that. It just seems like they aim for those. So just a thought.
Well, I'm gonna have planning department respond to that issue.
Are you guys requiring monuments? Are we, excuse me?
As part of the city's multiple family design guidelines, there is a requirement for projects over 5 units to provide some sort of kind of decorative entry statement, such as a monument sign. And so we can certainly work with the applicant on maybe some alternatives that would meet that condition or that development code requirement. And
Yeah,
that
I'm
could
looking at the turn onto, from Poplar to Ramsey, and you said you had motorcycle parking, and that's,
That's gonna be one of the 6 parking stalls next to the Hammerhead.
right,
Fire department came back with a comment on the radius for the Hammerhead. We proposed 15-foot radius, and they wanted 28. And when I did that, that will eliminate one of the parking, so I don't want to destroy the parking. I thought it will be shorter, but I will designate it for motorcycles.
no, I probably
And as
either
far as the
misspoke or misled you. It's the monument that.
And as
that
far as the
concerns me.
monument, I like the idea of having the monument. It give me a little bit of increase in value. So people, they feel like really they come into a nicer place than just, a neighborhood.
Until somebody runs into it.
Yeah,
And
Happen.
I'm taking a pride of this property, to be honest with you.
I know you do,
Yeah, I
but
do.
your renters may not. That's what I'm getting at. Okay.
And the monument itself would be kind of mid-block within the 150-foot kind of ish section of Poplar Street. So it wouldn't necessarily be a fast curve that people are taking with excessive speed. But we can certainly work on perhaps the placement too, just make sure that it's outside of any area of concern.
Thank you.
Lyle, you have something?
Yeah, I just had a question with that culvert. Is there historically been any blockages or overflow of that culvert that have run over that lady's driveway that'll eventually affect your property?
No, I did, several surveys there, and I had an expert to go out there and look at it, and no, we didn't see any.
We got a couple
flooding.
people in the box nodding their head yes, so.
I don't know.
Would that be a Yucaipa or San Bernardino County flood control issue to improve that box to
You guys are the
handle
neighbor?
historic flows?
Hold it.
For a point of order, we should make sure that
Yeah.
after the applicant's presentation, they get called up and able to speak in a microphone so we can actually have that recorded, and then the applicant can provide a rebuttal or discussion point afterwards as well.
Have you filled out a slip, sir? Okay, bring it up front here and give it to the young lady, and we'll have your opportunity. Okay, go ahead, sir, continue. That's it. Anyone else?
I'll be available for more questions.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, apparently we do have a public comment.
Bob Stewart.
If you could just state your name and address for our records, please.
Bob Stewart, my address is 11695 Largo Court in Loma Linda, California. And also we have,
I'm Steve Rush. My address is 34632 Avenue D, Yucaipa, California.
and just for the commission, thank you for an opportunity to talk, and staff. We're not nearly as familiar with this as the staff is, and probably the applicant. So there are some concerns that I think that I would like to have the commission consider, especially if you're going to be going through a process of approving incentives and what did you call it, and concessions. So foremost is public safety. And again, I'm not sure how these conditions of approval read. Pulled them down online. But standard fire department requirements, it specifically has that a street needs to have a cul-de-sac if it's 600 feet in length. Now, what's shown on this plan is a roadway that's over 1,000 feet in length, and there's no cul-de-sac. There's no cul-de-sac on Avenue D, no cul-de-sac on Poplar, or no cul-de-sac on Ramsey. So just don't understand how public safety is being addressed with regards to that entire broader issue of ingress and egress for that. So as a specific point, there should be a public cul-de-sac, in my opinion, not a private one. So if this is a private street, I don't know that the public at large could go in and utilize a cul-de-sac inside this apartment complex. So it seems to me that the completion of Avenue D or Poplar Street should be done in accordance with city standards. And that's what public safety is really driven by, that and all the city standards. Within it, there are elements of turnarounds, but again, none of that provides for a cul-de-sac. And the public at large utilizing hammerheads to fire department standards is somewhat awkward. Are those the Amazon trucks trying to do three-point turns in there? Is that fire trucks doing three-point turns in there? It's just as something really big is missing here in the broader sense of this entire design. Also noted that public sidewalks or even private sidewalks aren't being provided. I'm not sure why that would be waived inside, because one of the items that I did not hear in the presentation is designation of any ADU apartment units. And my understanding in accordance with state law that there are a certain percentage of apartments have to be accessible units. So that seems to be an omission. Perhaps that's something in the plans that I don't see at this point. And part of that, if you have ADA units, then you have to have ADA parking specifically for ADA units. In addition to that, a separate step, as I understand, is you have guest parking. You have to have ADA accessible parking for guests. Those are sole or separate or distinctly different from the ADA unit. So if I have an ADA unit and I have my own blue tag, I can't use the guest ADA. The guests still have to have ADA units. So I think there's a real constraint here on the parking, because a large percentage are covered, which is wonderful for the tenants, but that's not providing for the guest inadequate. So I think the math has to be done on parking assigned to units, and then what's left over. And of those left over, how are those facilitated for guest, ADA, and not? So I think there's basically an omission here in the evaluation.
So if we could ask you to wrap that up, please.
Certainly. A little more specific, some design issues. In no particular order, there is a backyard shown, dimension, but there's a V-ditch with no dimensions. There's retaining walls shown with no dimensions. There's retaining walls with no heights shown. Big unknown. So I don't know how much backyard's left when you start subtracting V-ditches out, walls out, and things of that nature. It provides for vinyl fencing. I think that's a disservice to the community. I think block walls would create absolute higher value for the project. The lifespan of vinyl fences are not that great.
Right. We thank you, sir. For your
Is there a
comments.
2-minute?
There is a 3-minute time limit, and it
Yeah.
was 4 minutes and 30 seconds was the comment.
Can Mr. Rush continue then?
You can have a speaker slip added to that, and
His
then
name is
certainly
on that slip?
the commission can pull that up, yeah.
You want a separate slip?
Yeah, for the second speaker.
Be right back.
Did you want to address any of those things at this time, Ben?
We'll let, that all the public speak, and then I can provide responses to,
All right, thank
to
you.
those points.
Next, we have Stephen Rush.
Yeah, my name is Steve Rush. Address again is 34632 Avenue D, Yucaipa. So, no particular order. All right, so we have the utilities underground. So I'm not seeing any of the new utilities underground underneath the plans of the project for existing. And then 88 tenants. Oh, the trees. I do notice in the plans that you guys have citrus trees that are lining up with the backyard. I know it's small, but I mean, living in Yucaipa for all of my life, I know it gets super cold up here, and citrus trees don't do well, especially if they're on the north-facing side of a big wall that's never going to get sun, so they're just going to end up dying anyway. So I don't see why they have the citrus trees there. And then that's it. Oh, the 7-person unit, and it's an occupancy per state law, saying that there's a 7-person limit, and
Per unit,
per unit. So
not 5.
not 5. So yeah, it's just little things like that. Look, so I think that's it, right? Yep, and I think that's it. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yep.
All right, I can provide some responses. I'm sure the applicant will as well. So I'll kind of go through a list of kind of the different components. So one is the requirement for the hammerhead and cul-de-sac. So the property itself is essentially turning into a private street. Within a uniform kind of project, there's no requirement for a public street to be provided. There's no planned public roads for this as part of the city's general plan. And so the use of a private drive aisle within a multifamily project is a acceptable practice. The hammerhead itself is to address certainly the larger turning and length of a fire truck, and so it's designed to provide that support. The applicant does provide kind of a cul-de-sac for kind of standard passenger vehicles to make that maneuver, but certainly fire trucks are larger, and so that's why the hammerhead design is there as part of the project, or as any project, if you do have a longer distance that requires a fire department turnaround, this is one of the approved standards as part of the fire code. As part of the public access itself, so it is kind of a private street, doesn't necessarily mean that those that live there, that's only people that can come through there, just like any other kind of apartment complex. If you have guests, they can use that as well. There was a discussion about the utilities being underground. The project itself on site will be required to underground all of their respective utilities. They're not necessarily obligated to underground neighboring properties' utilities outside of their frontage and outside of what the parameters are of the city's development code. I'll go into the ADA accessible units is triggered when you have 3 or more units that are connected. So the duplex style units do not trigger the ADA access requirements within the individual units. As part of the city's development code and objective design standards, we do not require block wall fencing around the property. And so as part of the Housing Accountability Act, city itself cannot require that block walls be provided. Just like any other fence, they do have a life cycle as well. Block walls don't last forever. And vinyl fencing is a permissible fence material for the city's residential districts. And then as part of the incentives and the requirements, so these are kind of as Maddie referenced in her staff report, these are objective standards. So if you meet these density bonus stuff, this affordability components, this is what you get to qualify for. There isn't necessarily a lot of magic or discretion on those components. And so the parking standards, they are providing access parking over the city's development code, and then also able to provide the 2 incentives and and the waiver as well as part of the density bonus, because they are selecting to do that. So that once they've chosen to do that and enforce those affordability, then they are eligible for those requirements. It isn't necessarily a decision point on the city staff or the decision makers at that point. And I think that addressed all the key comments. And I will say, kind of with the citrus as well, the trees themselves can kind of survive. The issue with the frost is the fruit quality, and so that's why you had this much spots for kind of the commercial citrus. But I have citrus trees at my house. I don't have a smudge spot, and they're doing pretty good. Hopefully I'll have some good Cara oranges in. And I'll let the applicant, if he has anything else that he would like to add, can certainly do so as well.
Wow. Good evening again. He was talking about Ramsey's Court, that is about 1,000 feet. The overall from this point to this point is about 288 feet. And we met with the fire marshal, and that's what we agreed on based on the California Fire Code. This will satisfy. This is not a cul-de-sac. We did it just to keep some convenience for the neighbors to have something to turn around for with the small cars. And the minimum width they requested per the California Fire Code is at 24 feet, and I allowed that one as well. And the gentleman was talking about the retaining wall. I have retaining wall at this section in here. At the corner to here is about maybe 5 feet. The rest of it goes down to 2 feet. And from this point, it goes down almost to 0. I'm just trying to retain the people's behind the yards in here. And I'm putting a V-ditch also in here. So I can, because currently I'm the recipient of their drainage. So I'm going to take it through the gutter in here and take it back to where it was supposed to go as historically. So I have to preserve all what's historically today. And that's what I'm doing. And on this side, I have a retaining wall in here because this one also is sloping on the neighbor, and I cannot drain my property to their property anymore. I have to bring it back and put it in this detention basin in here. So I believe, hopefully he got the answer he needs on the fire and the retaining wall and all that stuff. And the planning department, I think, answered the rest of it adequately.
Just so I'm clear, obviously there was a comment about the that existing channel having some historical challenges to it, but this property is not at all exasperating those existing conditions. So whatever has historically happened to that neighbor's property is an ongoing thing, and it would be their responsibility to deal with any kind of improvements to their property to do that, because this isn't really affecting her property at all. So I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll move to the commissioners. You have any other comments?
No, I'm fine, Jared.
I just wanted to ask, if they can't rent all of these units at the regular rate, what is the probability of all of these units turning into affordable housing?
Ultimately, so they are de-restricting 3 of the units for affordable stuff. If they become, based on the market, they could certainly have that. It just wouldn't be de-restricted. And so we want to claim that as part of the city's regional housing needs allocation benefit. But certainly as a general kind of survey within the RM districts, the standard RM districts, Most of the kind of multifamily projects without any DBA still falls within kind of the moderate income level. And so that's something we still do see, and that's probably will be the case here. We will do a kind of follow-up survey and then make sure that the city receives kind of the commensurate credit for the regional housing needs allocation obligations, but they would just be required to maintain the 3 units for the affordability.
Okay. And did you guys address the ADA parking that he was referencing? I don't know if I missed that or not.
Yeah, so the units, because they're duplexes, do not trigger the ADA, and then certainly the building plan check process will validate any other kind of accessibility components that may be applicable to the project. And so they'll be required to follow that through that plan check process.
That's all I have.
My concerns weren't necessarily for improvements of or protection of the neighbor's property. I just graded one of these sites in December that was based on historic topography, and as water eddied, now the street that was proposed per the city approval is now missing. So I was just curious about potential future plans to protect a naturally meandering wash. That, I have practical experience with this exact situation of it not lasting forever. So that's all I was getting at.
So I'm not sure that the burden would fall on the developer, as flood control has claimed responsibility for maintaining this channel. So if there is a time where it meanders out of that channel, seeing that there already are improvements in here, it would fall back onto the flood control to reestablish the channel, whether that's retrenching it or rip-wrapping it. Because there's a hard structure here, it's much less likely to meander. But again, it would fall onto flood control because they claim that easement
To protect adjacent buildings?
to protect the buildings and keep the water within the easement that's been developed. And that easement is all within that property on the north side.
Okay, thank you. Peggy, you have anything?
Wheels are turning.
Nope. Ooh,
I do.
Richard?
Yes. So these units will be fire sprinkled, right?
Yeah, they'll
All
be
units will be, okay. Are there fire hydrants along Ramsey Court?
Yeah, so as part of the California Fire Code, they'll be required to provide the sprinklers and then provide also the distance requirement for fire hydrants as well.
Okay.
And even though it's a private street with that length, they still have to comply with that.
Yeah, the fire hydrant applies to kind of any kind of structural distance. And so even on private, let's say a multifamily project like this or a commercial project, if you're pretty far from an existing hydrant to get to the farthest corner of the building, you can also be required to provide on-site fire hydrants, which this would qualify as that.
The site plan shows 3 on-site fire hydrants proposed, and again, to be validated through building plan check.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, any other comments, motions?
I will make a motion to approve this project and all the recommendations.
Okay. With that, I have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, now we have a motion and a second. So can we get a roll call on this?
And to confirm, this is with the additional condition that was requested by the San Bernardino County Flood Control District, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Chair Algauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Beck,
Yes?
Commissioner Chester,
Yes.
Commissioner Higginson,
Yes.
Commissioner Snodgrass,
Yes.
Commissioner Bick.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
project carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank
got a
you all, I
project.
appreciate your effort. Thank you, city staff, thank you.
Okay, with that, Ben, do you have any announcements or?
So I'm going to do the study session on the California Environmental Quality Act, since we had kind of a lighter agenda, and this is something that I'm sure we will see in the future as well, and figured it'd be a good time to kind of do the introduction. All right.
Okay, with that, Meeting adjourned.
I started out to do the presentation.